Hi, I'm a member of the MFTCentral support team, and today we're going to be showing you how to set up an SFTP server. On our last video, we covered how to make some basic configuration settings within the application to begin using MFTCentral. In this video, we'll show you how to set up an SFTP server, how to restart the SFTP server thread, how to create a file box, how to create a user associated with that file box, how to connect with a password, and how to connect with public key. So to get started, we'll log in. The first step we'll want to follow here is to go into SFTP server and create a server. So there is no server, SFTP server, that's just shipped with a product out of the box. So you'll need to go in and create one. Okay, the name is just not important. It's just a name that you're going to see displayed associated with a port. The port can be anything as long as it's available on the server. And if it needs to be below 1024, then you'll need to run the application as root. Otherwise, it can be anything. You can run as any user if you're 1024 or above. You can see we've got some other settings here, including how many authentication attempts per connection can be made, the timeout, which is just how long the connection can remain idle before we'll drop it. And then there's a server key. The server key is mandatory, so we won't be able to create this server without a server key. And then we can also control how many simultaneous users can connect to the server, how many simultaneous connections there can be, and how many times one user can make a connection at the same time. So the way this is configured now, if a user tried to come in and make 3 connections, they'd be successful, but if they tried to make a 4th, that would fail. Okay, and then there's some other key algorithms, encryption algorithms, key exchange algorithms that are set. For the most part, you can just accept the defaults here. So as I said, we will need to create a new SSH key. We'll do that now. And we'll just select the default of 1024-bit. And then we'll go ahead and save this record. Okay, and as it mentions here, the server has been created, but in order to activate it, you'll need to go down to the system thread settings, thread control, and start the SFTP server. In this case, it's actually running now, but you'll need to stop it and start it. So we'll just wait until that shows stopped. And then we'll go ahead and start it again. So now that new server that we created is now active. The next step we'd want to follow is to go into a file box definition. So a file box you can think of as a storage location for an SFTP user that we'll be creating next. So in this case, I'm going to create an account. We'll call it widget maker. And in this case, in our scenario, the widget maker is going to come in and place a file on our server. So we're going to call that's called a producer within MFTCentral. So they're producing files, they're sending files to you. And then we can put a comment in there, widget maker partner. Okay. So this is going to define the storage location for the user we're going to create next. Now we go up into SFTP user. We're going to add. In this case, you can see it's showing us the file box does not exist. So even though we're creating a user, it's checking to make sure that you have a file box underneath that user for the user to come in and either pick up files or deposit files. So now we've typed in widget maker. When we move on to the next field, you can see the warning disappears because it did find the /widget maker file box we created earlier. So there are some other fields that you can control for this user. For the most part, you can leave them as default. In this case, we're going to authenticate with a password, so we don't need to set the public key yet. We want the user to be able to authenticate for SFTP. You can see we can control how quickly a user will get locked out. In this case, 4 consecutive login attempts of failures will lock out the user. We'll leave that as is. We can also, if we know this user is only going to be active for, say, a month, I can go in and say, oh, at the end of January, lock the account out, or make it no longer valid. The user will, even though they have the correct password or public key, they won't be able to log in after this date. So that's useful if you know how long that user is going to be, should remain active. And then, of course, in this case, we're going to need to set a password. So I'm going to type in a password, and then we'll save that user. And we're all set. Now we'll go in, we're going to test that account. You can see that user's never logged in since we just created it. Now in this case, we need to log in and specify port 1122 since that's the port our server's listening on. We're going in as widget maker. And then it's telling us, this is a new server key I'm not familiar with. Do you want to save it? Yes. Okay, and we've logged in. So we've made an SFTP connection with a password, authenticated with a password, and we're logged in. Demonstrated is we can log in with password authentication. The next thing I'm going to do is show you that we can also configure this user to use public key authentication within MFTCentral. So I'm going to break the connection. We'll go back in now to this user. And you can see we've already set up that allow this user to authenticate with public key. But in order for them to actually use public key method, we need to associate a public key with this user. So I'm going to choose public key. This is the user's public key. Okay, you can see now the signature is associated with the user. It's gone in and parsed that public key and provided a signature for you to verify. And now we'll save the user. And you can see we logged in a minute ago. You can see that we have a last login associated with that user. Okay, now we're going to go back. This is the same user, same account. We're just going to use a different method. Okay, so now we're going to try to log in exactly the same way we did before. But as you see, I didn't have to supply a password, and that's because this OpenSSH SFTP client supplied my private key associated with this user, and it corresponded with a public key loaded on the server, and we just logged in without any password at all. So we've shown that how to configure a user in MFTCentral for both public key and password authentication. And we can also see if we look, our timeout, we hit the timeout. But if we go back in, we can see that in fact the test.txt file that we uploaded earlier is there. So it's regardless of what method you use to authenticate, you're logging into the same account. And there's the file that we uploaded when we used password authentication. So today we've covered how to set up an SFTP server, how to create a file box, how to create a user associated with that file box, and how to set up both password and public key authentication for that user. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.